All right, everybody, it's 12:04, and I think this would be a good time for us to go ahead and kick off our presentation. So first, I want to just wish everybody a happy afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to be present with us. On behalf of the Oregon Office of Rural Health and Mr. Yashar Sarparest, we would like to thank you for joining us today. Just in case you don't know who I am, my name is Trixie, and I am the program manager of recruitment and retention with the Oregon Office of Rural Health. One of the areas I have found in working with our rural organizations across the state is a lot of times there's questions surrounding the recruitment and retention of foreign medical graduates to help fill your primary care positions within your organization. I am pleased to introduce to you Mr. Yashar. He is an attorney at law with SARPA Law. He graduated from Gonzaga University School of Law in 2006. He brings over 15 years of legal experience working with physicians, employers, as well as their families on their immigration needs. I personally reached out to Mr. Yashar to see if he'd have an interest in presenting to our organization, to our members on solutions for recruiting physicians, as well as solutions for our employers. My hope in this presentation is that it can help break down some of the barriers um, or fears of recruiting foreign medical graduates to your organization. There's a lot of times a lot of questions that surround that process, and I think it would be a great benefit to learn more about Yashar's experience and working through that process. Yashar, I'm going to kick it over to you.
All right, thank you, Trixie, for the presentation, introduction, and we'll just jump into it. And I think when Trixie invited me for this, she wanted me to focus on the recruiters, HR, and the administrator side. So that's what I've done here. I've tried to keep it big picture as possible, and where it's not going to be a lesson on, you know, so much the semantics of the law and a legal lesson per se, although I will talk about the most critical scenarios that you will see. So with that, let's just say that it's going to be some fun slides you're looking at because, well, it's in the middle of winter in Oregon, and I don't want you guys to get bored. And I'm sticking with the theme of travel and international destinations because our clients are from all over the world. I like to say that I'm very fortunate. I get to travel the world from the seat of my office because of the physicians and other clients that we deal with that are really from everywhere. So, with that, let's get started. And Trixie did say that we will take questions at any time as they arise. So, happy to answer anything as we go on. Okay, so let's go to slide 2, please. So let's talk about the three typical scenarios that you're more likely than not to see when a physician is needing visa sponsorship and contacts you. So we'll talk about with those three top scenarios. Fun fact, I have a photo here because, believe it or not, we get a handful of physicians coming from sun-drenched islands, and who knows why, but they come to, soggy Oregon and enrich our lives with their bright energy. So let's go to slide 3. All right, so number one is going to be your most typical. This is the stereotypical standard um, path that you're going to come across. It's when the physician needs a J1 waiver and they are currently in residency or fellowship. Nearly, as you may already know, nearly all the physicians graduate on June 30th. So let's say that would be June 30th of this year, 2024. for the new incoming physicians. Now, there are rare, but time to time, you'll see a physician who will finish later because of some problem causing their program to be delayed. They got a late start. They had to stop attending for a certain period of time for personal issues, whatnot. So usually we're not talking about more than a month delay. And then, once in a very blue moon, and this has happened before, that a physician has actually dropped out. Now, to make them still qualified, they've dropped out of a fellowship, and you determine that you don't need that fellowship to be completed for them to be hired. They may have the sufficient residency to do the position that you want them for. You may not want them in that specialty for fellowship anyways. You might want to use them for what they have their residency in, or that they might have two fellowships and they dropped out of the second one. So if those things happen, we can still use them and we can still bring them on board. And there's ways to do that. Now, when are you going to encounter these physicians? Well, it depends on really how proactive that physician is. If they're pretty proactive, they can contact you all the way up to 1 year before they graduate. So that can mean that, you know, for a physician that is supposed to start here in June 2024, they may have contacted you the summer of this past summer that we just passed, 2023, and starting the conversation with, hey, I want to, come and explore your facility, your locale, et cetera, et cetera. So um, now there's others that are in between from the time of, a year before to when they're getting close to graduate. Others may wait until it's just a few months before they graduate. And that's just the name of the game. It depends on when they come towards you or how you find them. But the bottom line is that it's all possible and it's all doable. They can still start on time in most situations. Now, of course, if they truly waited to the last minute and it's really getting close, there may be waiver spots that are completely gone. In other words, the waiver is not available for them any longer, or they may be able to grab the last few waiver, one of the last few waiver spots, but by the time we get through the process with them for the waiver or the H-1B, etc., they're not going to make that targeted start date that you would like for them, or that it would allow them to make a smooth transition from the residency to fellowship. There's ways to mitigate that, so to speak, so that there's less time, downtime, and between them being finished and not working. And there's strategies that can be utilized without getting into all those right now, unless somebody has a specific question. But in the worst case scenario, which we usually can avoid, they would be required to, exit the United States and wait so we can finish their paperwork and then they'd re-enter. Now, um, what is the status? How are they approaching you? Where are they at in life? Well, they will be on J1 status. What is J1 status? Bottom line is it is a type of training status, allowing them to do their residency or fellowship in medicine. And tied to that J1 requirement as a foreign physician doing that type of study is that they're required to go back to their home country for 2 years upon graduation, or alternatively, they can obtain a J1 waiver. So that's where you come in as the potential employer. As an employer, you can place that physician at an underserved work site, a shortage area, and then you can, as a result, sponsor them so that they don't have to go back home for 2 years. You can sponsor them for a waiver. Now, in this scenario number one, you're really only going to pursue, there are many types of waivers, but you're only going to pursue A or B, which I've listed here in blue. Either the most typical, which is the Oregon Conrad 30 J1 waiver. Conrad is named after the originating U.S. senator who basically was a proponent of this federal program, which was then also administered partly by the states. And then 30 just stands for there's 30 slots. Okay. So the deadline in every state operates differently, although within confines of the federal rules. But in Oregon, each state has their own quirks or their own, excuse me, their own um, requirements above and beyond the federal requirements. So Oregon, October 1st is the deadline, October 1st of every year. That is coincides with the federal fiscal year. And that is the deadline where you must apply for the J1 waiver and have everything in the hands of the state. Now, is that something hard and fast? No, because you may not have encountered that candidate yet by October 1st. You may encounter them after October 1st, or you may be still putting the contract together with them, or they haven't signed on yet, or they haven't had the site visit, etc., etc. So is that something that is fatal that October 1st you haven't applied? No, certainly not. As long as there's slots left, it will be going on as a rolling basis to accept candidates. And now I I track these statistics historically because I'm a nerd with this stuff and I like it, and I also want to be able to anticipate for all my employers the trends of what we're going to be seeing in the next year or coming years, so we can act proactively ahead of time. And since 2016, every slot has been ultimately taken by the end of um, you know, by the end of that fiscal year. But it's been those have been depleted in varying paces. So sometimes it's quickly, but most of the time it's many many months away from October 1st. Okay, so for example, right now there are still slots remaining. There's approximately 3 to 4 slots remaining this year. And I can really wax philosophical on this issue a lot, so I won't too much, but just to say that the state of Oregon is very helpful. They want the slots filled. They will help you as employer get a slot as much as they can. They hate saying no to people. So it is unlike many other states where it seems like the states are in the business of turning people away. But that's quite the contrary in the state of Oregon. And one of the privileges and one of the reasons I really love handling these cases here in Oregon. And the administrators are really wonderful who administer the program. Okay, alternatively, you can pursue the federal HHS, Health and Human Services J1 waiver. They have unlimited slots throughout the year. Okay, so it's basically you can do it anytime you wish. However, there's limitations. The biggest limitation being that it's primary care only. Okay, so, and they have their own definitions of that, but it's generally understood definitions, anything internal medicine, family med, psychiatry, pediatrics. Hospitalists do qualify. I'm here to tell you, hospitalists do qualify as primary care in the eyes of HHS. And this was not always the case that the HHS program was this open. It was very rarely used up until recently, and the program opened up more to allow things like primary care for the first time. One of their limitations is they only want physicians that are being placed in highly underserved areas because the feds do rate, rank, number, however you want to call it, score every location in America by address. It does have a score, and that score you have to reach is HPSA, health professional shortage area score 7 or above. And secondly, it must not something new, a new policy that just was implemented this fiscal year was that they do not want to entertain and they will reject, they will not allow um, underserved areas that are proposed for withdrawal. Every few years, the feds redesignate and update their database, and you will see a lot of sites in Oregon have become now proposed for withdrawal, and you have to make sure that has not been proposed for withdrawal. It's very tricky to read the data on it. It's not easy to really follow, and we had to figure that stuff out, and a lot of attorneys had to figure it out on how to read what is in fact proposed for withdrawal, because sometimes you will see one work site has two HPSA designations as being underserved, and one is proposed for withdrawal, but another one is intact. You can use the intact one and still proceed. All right, so bottom line, let's skip forward and say that once the attorney has obtained successfully that J1 waiver and it's now approved, well, you go on to the next step, that being the H1B. I like to call it employment authorization, because that's what gets you permission to work. And then that's requested and that's approved. So then the physician can start on the proposed date that everybody's agreed on for you. The physician is, as I have maybe mentioned already, the physician is obligated to work for that sponsoring employer for 3 years in order to satisfy their J1 waiver. So they're locked in with you guys for 3 years, and only when they've satisfied that 3 years will they be let off the hook from going back to their home country for 2 years, and then they've satisfied their obligations. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we're starting to get more rarer and rarer in these scenarios. So second scenario is less common, but it happens, is that the physician needs an H1B transfer to a nonprofit, whether that nonprofit is you guys, so it's on site, or it's off site at another entity where you're placing the physician. Again, they are currently in residency or fellowship, or they've actually since left the United States. So that means they finished their residency and fellowship in the United States. It's been several months, but more than likely it's been years later. They started another career, let's say abroad or in their home country, and they decided, I want to come back to the United States and I want to work for you guys, the new employer. All right, so again, how do we see these physicians? Where are they coming from? Well, just like number one, the physician will contact you anywhere from a year to a few months before their June 30th graduation. Again, unless they've already graduated a long time ago. Now in this situation, they've never been on J1 status, okay? So they've never been on J1 status. Instead, they're currently on H1B, and they don't need a waiver, therefore. They can skip the waiver and be sponsored for an H1B transfer right away. And again, alternatively, if they had graduated a long time ago, well, they don't have any status. They're in their home country. Either way, the point of the story is that because they don't require a J1 waiver, then there are other roadblocks, legal roadblocks, preventing them from being sponsored for H1B. And in order to sponsor them on H1B, you as the employer will need to fit into one of these two categories. Again, this is for this type of candidate, right? A lot of times you may pass over this type of candidate, but if you want to try to utilize this type of candidate, then you, the employer, will need to either be A or B. Either A, you as the employer are a nonprofit who's also affiliated with an institution of higher education, uh, aka university or college. And if you can establish that, and that is its own legal test, then you can place that physician on site for you, the employer. Or alternatively, you can still utilize this candidate if you place the physician, so you're hiring them, they're your employee, and you're taking care of them as your employee, but you're placing the physician off-site. You're placing the physician, and the legal requirements are for more than 51% of their time at a nonprofit affiliated with a university or college. So the typical scenario for B is going to be that you are an employer who's a practice, so a practice of cardiologists, a practice of hematologists, oncologists, even sometimes a practice of hospitalists. And then you're placing, so you're a clinic, let's say, and you don't have any kind of uh, you don't own the work sites. You're placing the physician at these other work sites at your local hospital or some other entity that has owns the clinic. And so then you just have to make sure these things are satisfied um, from from the end site. In other words, the place that you're placing let's say you're placing them at a hospital, you want to make sure that hospital is where they're spending at least 51% of their time. That hospital is a nonprofit, and that hospital is affiliated with a university or a college. All right. Was there a question, Trixie?
Yes, there is from Christian. His question is, are there any costs associated with the J1 H1B sponsorship? And if you're going to cover that,
Yes.
I might not understand the second piece of his question. So let's address the first.
I will cover that at the very end,
Okay.
and the answer is there is cost associated. Yep, I'll cover that at the end, and if I still don't give you the answer you want, please ask again.
Okay. Thank you.
Um, okay, so then let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, then the third, I'd say most common scenario, although this becomes more rare, is that the physician needs a special transfer request to change jobs. So they're currently on a J1 waiver with another employer. Okay, so they have not finished their 3-year J1 waiver period with their current employer. Okay, but if they show that if you can show or the physician can show that there are extenuating circumstances of why that physician cannot finish up their 3 years with another employer, they can do an H1B transfer to you as a new sponsor, to a new employer. Okay, and you get a windfall. Why do you get a windfall? Is because you don't need to go through the J1 waiver process anymore, right? They've already gone through that. So the physician simply has to finish their remaining balance with you. At a minimum, they have to finish their remaining balance, although you're more than likely going to sign a contract with them for, at least 3 years or more. So they'll probably stay longer. But that's how that works. Now, the typical scenario is there's a problem between them and the employer. The employer, there could be also personal problems with the physician in that locale due to health issues. There could be a termination. There could be a number of scenarios. There could be issues going on with the child of the physician who has personal health problems, etc., and they need to access certain healthcare or certain things in a different city, and they can't do it any longer where you are. Well, where that employer is. There are so many scenarios that can arise. This really takes creative lawyering. There's no right answers on this. The scenario has to be taken a look at case by case. But it happens, and it happens all the time across the nation. All right, let's go to slide 6. Next one, please. All right, so now we're kind of getting into the more, I think, things that you'll find useful as far as, what are these physicians thinking? How do you get them? What are their priorities? And then why is it nice to have these physicians? Stuff like that. All right, so I created a list of advantages to international medical graduates. So IMGs or FMGs, foreign medical graduate, international medical graduate, that's the terminology we use for basically immigrant physicians, right? So physicians who've completed their medical degree abroad, but they must have finished or will finish their residency or fellowship in the United States. That's required. Okay, well, they're more accepting of working in an underserved area in exchange for that opportunity to remain in the United States. So, more likely that they will go to an underserved area and stay there. They have many have experience already working in their home country as a physician. Many have already handled high stress, difficult hours, and other adversity in their home country. So for them to be put in those situations in the US or in an underserved area is sometimes not a big deal for them. They handle it well. They're prepared to remain in most cases for 3 years, right? In most cases, if they're required to do their J1 waiver, they know and they're ready for that. They're prepared for that. And if you sponsor for a green card, then that could be 1 or 2 years additional right off the bat. So you're looking at 4 to 5 years that you're going to have them because, well, the law really requires it. And they're ready for it. I like this point, they often will be a good source of recruitment to you to attract future international medical graduates, either I see it often from their own residency or fellowship that they came out of, from a younger classmate, um, or their home country themselves. And that doesn't mean necessarily they're calling somebody back in their home country and says, I have this opportunity. It's usually that friend or colleague is a little behind them in their education, and now they're going through, let's say, a year or two later or 3 years later, they're finishing up their residency or fellowship in the United States, and they're starting to look around, and they're going to call your doctor is going to call them because they stay in touch, or their spouses stay in touch, etc. And they're going to um, uh, sing your praises as the employer and the location and how great it is here. And hey, why don't you come out and check it out? And that's really worth its weight in gold. You can't replicate that. And that's many times the deciding factor for that new physician to come on board. Well, many of the next factor is that many are married to another physician who then their spouse can also be employed at a partner clinic or hospital in town, or within your same organization. And so that's, a double windfall to you. But we see that a lot, that two foreign physicians together, or it's one foreign physician and the spouse is a physician but a U.S. citizen. Okay, that they met when they were in the United States. They met, abroad, whatnot. It doesn't matter, but they've already are together, and so they're moving around together, and so the U.S. citizen may not need sponsorship, but the immigrant spouse does, and that's a priority for them to find an employer that is going to be a safe harbor for the immigrant physician is sometimes the bigger deciding factor than the American who can get a job anywhere they want and is going to be less picky. So next on the right side says they bring diversity to the region. Well, that's my personal favorite, and that's why I love what I do, is that we get to talk with people from around the world with their amazing experiences, and they're really incredible people. So they bring that diversity to the region, especially in rural Oregon, where we may not have that. And then many are grateful for their opportunity, and they remain in the local community long term. Okay, a long time, and I know countless like that. Or they make their home indefinitely. meaning I know physicians that since I began my career, they're still in the local community. Okay, and then last point I want to express is that they, and this is really a fact, and statistics bear this, is that they often, these physicians are in the top tier amongst physicians in their home country. And they grew up also in a major world city. Why do I tell you that? I just tell you that because, well, they're usually great doctors. And I put here in parentheses, it's not easy to become a US doctor as a foreign medical grad. It's extremely competitive as a US graduate, but then as a foreign graduate, it is extremely difficult. So they're usually the best and brightest from their home country. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, here. So what is important to a IMG physician? Recruitment tips, right? So I think this is really the important stuff. I think that it's not written in any book, and this comes from simply test testing and experience. We found that, and this is kind of my own terminologies and nomenclatures that I've created, and in my teaching, I suppose, is that we found that peace of mind is often a critical deciding factor for many immigrant physicians choosing an employer. What is the definition of peace of mind? Peace of mind. It is confidence that their immigration needs will be taken seriously and successfully completed. So peace of mind is simply instilling confidence in them that, okay, this employer is taking my immigration needs seriously. It is of paramount importance to me. And I have confidence that they are going to be successful with this and not drop any balls and everything will go smoothly. Remember, in blue I've put in here, is that they don't have immigration. If they don't have immigration status, if there's any kind of issue, mess up, delay, problems with their case that could then jeopardize them completely. They can't stay in the United States, they can't work in the United States. So that's why for them, it's almost foundational. It's almost, very fundamental for them that their immigration needs be met. Because without that being met, then as a result, they can't pursue their dream, their love. They can't, gain the fruits of their years of labor to get into the United States, go through all this headache. So where do these physicians tend to go? They tend to stick to signing contracts with, these are generalizations, there's exceptions to every rule, but they sign contracts with employers that either have a proven track record of hiring international medical graduates. So not to worry if that's not you don't hire too many or you've never hired any, that's okay because there's or they stick with an employer who has an articulable plan to ensure their needs are met. They will give a chance to an employer who's never done this before or hasn't done it in a while or does it less frequently. But they have to be instilled confidence. They have to have that peace of mind. And so a good strategy is to have the physician speak to an immigration counsel early on as possible in the site visit or hiring process so that they can have their questions answered and their worries put at ease. It doesn't have to be a long talk. The physicians will often come away with that session, getting all their answers to their questions with peace of mind. And also you, the employer, will get good feedback from somebody like me on, okay, the quality of this candidate. And, this can't, having dealt with hundreds of these physicians, I can tell you, wow, this is a great candidate for XYZ reason. And the cost level of the case. Oh, this is a straightforward case. It's going to cost you, probably X, Y, and Z. I'm confident in it. Or, there's all these other issues. This is not worth it. Or because I can't really assure you it's going to get approved. Or it is worth it. We can work through them. It's going to cost this much extra. It's up to you guys if you want to pursue it. So depends on that, but it depends on the situation. But so that's a strategy early on to have them talk to somebody. Okay, let's go to the next one, please. So continuing on that vein, what is important to these IMG physicians? Peace of mind plus act fast. Okay, that's what's successful. Success. That's what works successfully. During that recruitment stage, the physicians will often jump ship if they don't get their peace of mind quickly. Doing something simple as making sure they have their immigration answers soon, okay, can pay dividends in securing a candidate. Again, if their peace of mind isn't there in their feelings, in the feelings that they're experiencing at the time of recruitment, then oftentimes that interest will wane very quickly. So bottom line is giving them that peace of mind quickly is key, and getting across the message that their immigration needs are very important to you. So doctor such and such, this get that sentiment across. It is important for me that we get you through the finish line with your immigration needs. It's not a second thing or third thing on my list. There's deadlines in immigration. You have to be aware of that. And the physicians know this. Most of them know this, or they talk to colleagues who've been through this process before, and it weighs on their mind. So that's why, again, time is of the essence in their mind. And then I just put here, note, 2024, physicians have many employers to choose from, and you have to remain competitive. And one of the ways to remain competitive, which doesn't cost that much, is just give them that peace of mind as soon as possible. All right, slide number 9, next one, please. All right, so developing an immigration program or plan. So I just put here on the left side, after your first hire, it gets easier. All right. And I assure you this. So first point is, so developing a program, a plan, thinking ahead. You want to be open to visa sponsorship because it draws an entire new candidate pool. 20% or more of practicing physicians are, international medical graduates, and that number is rising dramatically because of the shortage of physicians and shortage of physicians graduating from residency and fellowship. So you'll want to make sure that your work site where that future physician will be placed is in an underserved area. It's not going to be removed, and meets Medicaid, Medicare percentages, at least that Medicaid, Medicare percentages, there's requirements for that for the Oregon J1 waiver. It's nothing to be extremely panicked about. Well, you have to run some numbers, but if you're short, there are ways to rerun the numbers depending on how you came up with them. And in other words, to make sure you're running the numbers correctly and with the correct work sites or the facilities where the physician will be working, etc. So in other words, you may have miscalculated the numbers. And finally, if you can't meet the thresholds, there's certain exceptions, one of which is the state of Oregon will allow you to articulate how you will get those numbers up, those percentages up. If it is not an underserved area, you may still be eligible through Oregon to sponsor for a J1 waiver through what's called a flex waiver. What is a flex waiver? It allows you to flex and allow a physician into a J1 waiver spot where they are working in a work site that is itself not designated as being underserved, but you will be serving patients from outlier areas that are coming in to see the physician, but those patients are coming from underserved areas. So again, where the physician is located may not be designated as underserved, but where the patients are coming from, those areas are underserved. And there's ways to prove that, and therefore the state of Oregon is quite willing to work with you to get a flex waiver if they qualify. I don't want to belabor this next point, but if you want to open the door to non-J1 waiver physicians, in other words, going back to that other slide where we're talking about, if somebody's never been on J1, a physician, then you can start exploring other alternatives. Either you're a nonprofit, and if you are a nonprofit, then you want to make sure you set up affiliations with colleges or universities so you can pursue these alternative candidates. Or if you are a for-profit, and you're placing physicians at a nonprofit, then you're going to want to make sure that that nonprofit has their affiliations set up, etc. Next, you will need to have certain immigration-related language in your employment contract. Some are required language, and some are just to remain competitive with other employers. Next, you should have a point of contact, okay? You should have a point of contact within your organization for all your immigration issues that are going to arise during the physician's tenure. This will instill confidence and stability for that physician, that they have a go-to person. From there, you can choose. You can stay as active as involved as you wish if you want to learn the ropes, or you can outsource as much as you wish to the attorney. But the bottom line is, it's a good idea to have a point of contact, no matter how knowledgeable they are at the moment or not. Now, again, remember these physicians are often, require a lot of hand-holding, have a lot of questions, or can be nervous Nellies. Not all, but many can be. And that's because they feel vulnerable about their immigration needs. So once they know there is someone there to protect them, and they have that relationship and confidence with the attorney and or contact at the employer, then they really feel at home and things really go well. But don't be surprised. Yes, they can be very scared, and it shows in their personality sometimes in in stressful mannerisms, I guess you could say. But things get better. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, please. All right, so I think we're nearing the end and keeping time for more questions. And so I think this goes to one of the questions I was asked earlier. Yes, without getting into the numbers, Trixie wanted me to explain that, hey, what costs here? What process has a cost associated with it? Okay, so on the right side, let's talk about that first. Is costs for a standard case entail, well, or I guess you could say a standard candidate, a J1 waiver and an H1B. Okay, an H1B that lasts for 3 years. It has costs associated, both the J1 waiver and the H1B. HHS does the government costs associated with the HHS waiver is actually lower, but nonetheless. So there's the legal fees, right? Attorney fees, etc. And then there's the government fees themselves. Then there's the green card process. There's government costs for that, and then there's attorney legal fees for that. Are you obligated to pursue a green card process for the candidate? No, you're not. There's no law that says you're obligated. Is it recommended? Yes, because it is industry standard, and physicians know that when they shop around comparing employers on who they want to go with and who's going to cover them. And that's a conversation that we can have, or you can have with whomever is attorney, as far as what is the standard and to what level should be covered and what are the options. And there's multiple routes for a green card process. So one of the beautiful things about physician immigrants, as opposed to, let's say, an engineer or architect or etc., is there's specific carve-outs creating extra paths to green card for a physician. And okay, then next is H1B extension. That means once they're done their 3 years, they may need to have an extension to go beyond the 3 years for an extra year 4 and beyond. Well, it's the same government and legal fees from the beginning again, except you don't have the J1 waiver to worry about this time. So you're okay skipping that. And then I just put a note here is that things happen time to time which cost extra, and that's and any time there's a material change, which to some degree you may be able to avoid material changes in employment, like hours, wages, work site changes are critical, requiring an amendment. then if you avoid those material changes to the best you can, then you avoid requiring what's called an H-1B amendment, where you have to pay for filing another H-1B to amend the terms of employment. And then on the left, I just wanted to say, compared to recruiter percentages, sign-on bonuses, and most importantly, leaving the position empty, the immigration costs pay for themselves, especially when the physician is employed for 3 years. You know you're getting them 3 years, and you will attract more IMGs to build up that program. So it is a long-term game, and we do see employers who've never hired before, and within after their first hire, the very next year they're hiring 2, 3 new international medical graduates, and some of them came from word of mouth from the first batch or the first one. So it can happen pretty quickly, the domino effect. And all these experiences that let's go to the next slide, please. All these experiences that I'm sharing with you come from, you know, from employers who I've spoken to, when a candidate has, uh, not signed on with them, or a candidate that expresses to me what went on when they didn't sign on with another employer, et cetera, et cetera. So I've seen both sides of the picture, and that's where my experiences are coming from. So yeah, ready for questions.
Thank you, Yashar. I just wanted to share a few thoughts from my experience and my perspective, in recruiting. My previous position, I was a recruiter for a critical access hospital here in Eastern Oregon for many, many years. And we did recruit J1 candidates and even H1B candidates to our organization. And just some of the things I identify as a recruiter is I've seen both the positive and I've seen the non-positive of it. Like you talked about, in your slides. On the positive aspect of it, we were able to fill some of those hard and difficult positions, or positions we had open for a long time. We were able to fill them with a qualified, experienced, strong candidate, and we were able to fill that for 3 years. And in my experience, a lot of time those providers stayed 5 to 7 years. And when I look back now, some of those providers are still practicing at that community hospital, and they've been there over five 5 to 7 years. And that, is a very positive aspect. But I've also seen, where sadly some providers do have to leave. A lot of times it's for outside extenuating circumstances, family situation, they need to leave the area. Another thing, that you pointed out, probably the biggest thing is transparency and good, strong communication, and having a good team that helps you go through that process, which that team, should include your director, your human resources, having legal counsel present, to walk you through that process. And for those sites that have never gone, this route before for recruitment, it can be very intimidating to do that. And what I, would advise is come together with your team, develop a plan, and a part of that plan, including obviously the legal, guidelines, so that you have a good understanding of the steps to take, and that you can communicate that with that future potential candidate, that you're looking to hire under that status. Those are probably some of my tips in that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's great to know from somebody who's involved with it firsthand and in rural Oregon and Eastern Oregon. I mean, doesn't get much more rural than that. Correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Very difficult to recruit. So yeah. Um, if we can go to the next slide, and I'm still taking questions, is just that, look at the beach and think happy thoughts. A candidate will come to you, and you can do this. Um, and really, again, we have employers that have never been through this. They're scared about it. They've lost candidates to other employers, international medical graduates to other employers who were more well equipped that answered the questions right away. And then we turn things around. We come on board, and the very next year, they hire new candidates using the international medical graduate pipeline. So and they're happy. So of course, there's always learning pains that first year. But I show you the slide to say that you can contact me anytime for a hand if you're curious about questions and I just want to know, hey, am I on the right track, or is this what I should be doing or whatnot? And that's fine. I'm happy to help people out, and that's kind of a community benefit. And yeah, and you can always talk to Trixie as well, and she can reach out to me if you want. So, but any more questions?
It looks like we don't have any more questions. So we'll just end it with thank you again, Ishar, for taking time to visit with all of us and sharing your knowledge and information. I really appreciate it. I want to thank all of the participants for taking time out of your schedule to join us today as well. And again, if you have any questions, I know Yashar would be happy to answer them. Please reach out to myself or our office if you have any questions on recruitment and retention services that the Office of Rural Health provides as well. And we wish you all a great rest of your week and a nice long weekend.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you to everybody. Thank you for your time. And thank you, Trixie, for putting it all together.
Yep. Thank you.